Welcome to the Connected Enterprise Podcast. This is Carl Lewis, your host, and my guest today is Nancy Drees. Nancy, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Great. Well, Nancy, tell us a little bit of, I know that you've been in kind of recruitment for a long time and you worked for some large firms and then you got a better idea than that. So tell us about that and kind of what you're doing these days.
Sure. Yeah, I have been in recruiting for quite some time, approaching 25 years now. Did start my career on the staffing agency side. I worked for a large national staffing firm for over a decade and learned everything and anything that I could about recruiting. When I left there, I moved into the corporate world and spent about 3.5 years with a startup in the mobile application development space and grew that company pretty significantly in a short term from about 25 employees to over 300. We expanded internationally. It was great. And then I left there, and that's when I started Vacaré Group. So my company's been in business for just over 10 years now, and we're a consulting firm. And we primarily work with smaller businesses, startup businesses, and some, medium to large size businesses that don't have an internal infrastructure around recruiting. And we come in and we be that for them. On the larger company side, we might supplement their existing infrastructure, but primarily we function as that department for them.
Well, I thought that was such a great idea because, many of the companies that I know are kind of smaller-ish, maybe medium size, but they kind of struggle with recruitment. And, it could be that somebody's wearing multiple hats. A lot of the companies that I know that, the owner, the president, the CEO himself is doing interviews, right? And one CEO that I know in particular, his name will go nameless, of course, has said, if we want a bad employee, the first thing we should do is have me hire them, right?
I see scenarios like that quite often, and that's why they usually call us.
Yeah, exactly. So, but it's still, small businesses do struggle, right, to really find quality candidates. What should they do, to help locate the best people for their organizations?
Yeah, so I think the biggest misconception and probably mistake that most small businesses make when they decide that they need to hire employees and hire teams is to think that they can put a job posting out there and collect resumes and then just choose who they want to hire. And it just doesn't work that way anymore. It used to work that way, but it doesn't work that way anymore. That's not how people are finding jobs anymore. People are networking and really using digital platforms more. So when a small company, or any company, honestly, for that matter, thinks about how they're going to attract people that they want to hire that are going to be quality candidates, they really need to think about what these potential employees are seeing out there in terms of digital content and what's on their website, and things that are going to compel them to investigate what that company does more. The second thing is, sometimes companies don't realize it, but especially small companies, but they need to leverage their existing employees. Their employees are going to be the biggest ambassadors for them. They're the biggest cheerleaders. They love what they're doing. They work there for a reason. And, studies show that employee referrals tend to be one of the best sources of really quality and long-term hires. So that's another piece that kind of goes by the wayside. And, there's larger companies will have these really cool employee referral programs, but smaller companies don't think about that. And it's a really easy way to gain really quality in interviews and higher quality people. And then once they get somebody that's interested, whether they apply or through a partner like myself, really thinking about when they're interviewing people, what am I hiring for? Am I hiring for 10 out of 10 skills, or am I really looking at the potential of this person to grow with the company that we're growing, and really trying to hire the person and the potential of that person, as opposed to hiring that piece of paper that is their resume. So those are some of the things that I've seen really help when smaller companies can change their mindset into, it's not just an application. And most of the time it's not an application. And if they do hire a partner, which I strongly recommend, some sort of partner, because they don't, like you said, don't have time to recruit. They don't have the knowledge of how to do it. They don't have the infrastructure. Companies like mine can go out and direct source candidates and generate interest. And that's what's lacking in just, posting a job.
It's interesting. You mentioned, that the whole way you get a job has changed. I remember, like you, about 25 years ago, I started the career that I have today. And so I did other things prior to that. But when I started this career, it was actually an ad in the newspaper, right?
Oh, yeah.
Consultant wanted. And I answered that ad, and it was actually one of my customers, right, at the time, that I ended up going to work for and became a very close friend. We worked together for 7 years. They ended up giving me their company that I sold to the company I'm working for today. And but I can't see that happening, hardly at all. What are the tools, that if you're job hunting today, what do you do? I mean, where do you start? Where are some places you go?
Yeah, the biggest tool that is out there, and I think widely used across all different demographics, meaning, people coming out of college to 20 plus year folks that are looking for new jobs, is LinkedIn. It used to be, the days of like Monster and Dice and Career Builder. That used to be the way people, and then if we go back, like you said, newspaper, which I used to look at the newspaper for jobs too. Those days are definitely gone. So LinkedIn's definitely the biggest tool. So, when I talk with candidates that are looking for advice on job searching and really honing in on those opportunities that are going to be the right fit for them, or having recruiters find them, right, and seeking them out, your LinkedIn profile is, in my opinion, more important than your resume. That's where you're going to be found, and that's what recruiters look at these days. There's other considerations for the company if they're looking to hire folks. And again, it goes back to demographics. Recent grads are finding jobs on TikTok. So like they need to be present on TikTok and Facebook and things like that. But LinkedIn definitely is the most prominent one that I think that is widely used.
It's interesting because I would say even at this stage, and I probably have not updated my LinkedIn profile in 5 years.
Oh, probably need to do that.
I hear that all the time. Not that much has changed, but there are nuances, I'm sure. But I still get people inquiring to me through that, right? And and of course, I'm publishing a lot of things on LinkedIn, but that profile piece is kind of stale. So it does kind of demonstrate how important that is, for sure. Are candidates looking for something or job? Are they looking for jobs differently now than they did before the pandemic? I mean, has that changed something for them?
Yeah, so I definitely think it's changed. The pandemic changed pretty much everything about recruiting, and probably a lot of things in other industries too. But the priority have shifted, because during the pandemic, everybody was working, mostly everybody that could was working remotely. And then we started to kind of get back into the office, and there was some hybrid type of stuff. And now companies are, saying maybe back in office full time. So I think salary used to be really, really important to a lot of people. And now when they're looking for opportunities, they're really looking for things like that flexibility, that work-life balance, that ability to kind of manage their time. And salary, everybody wants to get paid, but salary has taken a back seat to those sort of things of not having to get in a car and drive for an hour. So the job opportunities that are out there that can provide those sort of benefits are the ones that job seekers are looking for more and more. In terms of where they're looking, I think, again, LinkedIn is a, widely used platform, but I see more of the networking piece of it coming out than people just randomly applying for jobs. And then you have some disciplines like engineering and enterprise sales folks where they don't need to look. They just sit back and they wait for recruiters or hiring managers to send them messages on different platforms or LinkedIn, and they can kind of cherry pick on, okay, I want to respond to this one. This looks kind of cool. I'm gonna, check it out a little bit, but they don't have to go out and look, and the opportunities are really coming to them.
It's really interesting, that I think, my opinion is that when people start shopping and trying to find out about companies that they might want to go to work for, they're really looking into what I refer to as culture. Is this a place I want to work at? Because you can't go on somebody's website typically or LinkedIn and find out how much they pay. Right.
Yep.
That's not going to be posted. But you can read all kinds of things. You can read, about, blogs from employees saying what a great place this is to work. I mean, if the company's smart, right, you have these sorts of things. Are there other ways that people are kind of investigating companies today?
Yeah. And I agree with you on the website piece. It's so hard to get potential candidates to get interested. And so if you're going to get them to be driven to your website, you need to highlight those sort of things like the culture and what's the benefits of the culture, what's the mission, what challenges are you solving in the world, and that kind of stuff. But then there's other sites like Glassdoor that people, current employees and past employees can rate their their experience with the organization. And it's become a very on the candidate side, perception of a reliable source. I don't know how reliable it is because the people, just like Yelp, right? It's like the Yelp for recruiting. When you're not happy with something, you go to Yelp and you give a bad review. And so that happens a lot on Glassdoor, and companies really need to be aware of that and get ahead of that and make sure that that's not happening through, just promoting and living their culture and making sure they're staying true to what that employee heard, not only in the interview, but during their onboarding and during their entire time that they work there. So Glassdoor is probably the biggest one that can be a huge benefit for companies and a huge endorsement, but it can also be a huge detriment if they're not kind of living their culture.
Yeah, it's one thing to read the website and see that the company says we're a great place to work. Do the employees think it's a great place to work? How important is what a company's customers think to a potential employee?
I think it's very important what their customers think. I can relate it to my own organization. And when I interview candidates to hire them, whether it be for my recruiting team or my operations team or my marketing team, mentioning, I went to your website, I see that you worked with this customer and you're not working with them anymore. Why not? And you better have a good story about that, because again, in the world of digital platforms and social media, chances are that candidate probably knows somebody at some point in time that worked either at that customer company or with somebody there, and everybody does backdoor references and they want to know what the real story behind the website is. So it's very, very important, especially in certain disciplines like sales and customer success. A salesperson doesn't want to hear that the customers weren't happy with whatever a software, like they didn't deliver the upgrades or whatever it might be, because they're going to look at that like, okay, that's going to be difficult for me to meet my quota and to sell to other customers if that's how this customer feels.
Yeah, a friend of mine said, never ask a question that you don't already know the answer to. So they probably already know why that
Yeah.
customer isn't with you anymore. And they're
Yeah.
just testing. Do you know the reason? Yeah.
Yes,
Um,
exactly. Yeah.
if recruitment is hard, retention these days has got to be, number two in line, if not even first.
Yes.
Um, what is it now that's making employees stick?
Yeah. It starts from literally from the first conversation before they're even an employee, and the hiring process and the candidate experience, all of that sticks with an employee even when they join an organization. So once you successfully have an employee and you're excited to hire them and you're super psyched that you got them and you recruited them, um, there's so many things that can happen that would make an employee potentially leave your organization. And thankfully, most of them are pretty avoidable if you're kind of on top of it, right? So you need to look at your onboarding process. Are they really being set up for success? When they're kind of set free, right, after their onboarding training is done, are they set up for success, and can they feel like they're doing a good job? Can they be successful? And with that success, is there opportunity for them to grow? If they're not seeing, any kind of upward mobility, and a recruiter like myself reaches out to them on LinkedIn and they're a team lead and now I have a manager job, they're going to talk to me. So making sure that there's that upward mobility. And then there's like the non-monetary things. The people love recognition, and they should be recognized when they're doing a good job. They, want their voices to be heard. They don't want to be micromanaged. So it all ties back to that culture. And is it a culture of learning, of moving up? Is it a culture of collaboration and,
Excuse me.
people having a voice?
Yeah. Yeah. Again, I've been, this is the longest place I've ever worked at Vision33. And I can, one thing that really mattered to me, it was quite a while back now, but my wife got cancer.
Mm.
And the way that the organization, responded to us in that moment, in those months, that built loyalty in a way that I had never
Yeah,
experienced it before. And
yeah,
it came from the very top, right, of
yeah,
the organization, just their loyalty towards me, their expression of care to my wife, the cards, from one of the best managers in the company. My wife still talks about it, right? I would
yeah.
have to have her permission to leave Vision33
Right.
right, at this point in time.
Yeah, and jobs are a family decision, or, so it's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think, I think a lot of times, executives forget the role they play in kind of when an employee feels like they're in touch with them and that they are more than just, one of the 500, right?
Yeah.
They know my name, they know my situation, they know my kids, they
Yeah.
know my story. I think all of that is so important. And
Exactly.
it if it's not part of the job description of an executive, it should be, because I think it really matters in today's world for sure. Um,
Yeah, for sure.
I always ask these questions, of my guests, like, if I consider them a subject matter expert, that give me the top 5 things, right, that you would encourage an organization to focus on to help them develop long-term employees.
Yeah, on the top of my list, it's kind of on the coattails of what you just said, but it's strong leadership and hiring the right leadership that is going to live and breathe the culture themselves, because that becomes contagious within their teams. So one bad leader, one poisonous hiring manager, negativity, micromanaging, that can really damage a company in so many different ways, in terms of retention rates and just, being able to hire, and just so many different ways. So strong leadership definitely would be, my number one. The second would be, and I kind of mentioned this before, but is that that type of culture where there's feedback, good, bad, and indifferent. People want to know. They don't want to guess if they're doing a good job. They want to be recognized if they are doing a good job. And so ongoing feedback, I know in my company, I just take 5 or 10 minutes to talk to every single person every week and say, hey, how's it going? Are you having fun? Are you having challenges? How you feeling? And that it goes a long, long way. And they always say, it was great. Thanks so much for reaching out. I feel good, and then just in this current climate, I think remote opportunities, flexibility, work-life balance is, definitely something that companies need to adopt if they can, because they're going to have a difficult time if they don't. And then I would say advancement opportunities, training opportunities, like I mentioned before. And then last on the list is, for me, and I think for a lot of candidates, is compensation. All these things can be great and everybody can feel good and we're doing a great job. But at the end of the day, people do want to get paid, and they want to get paid fairly for the job that they're doing. So really knowing what the market rates are and being competitive with those market rates, and otherwise you're going to lose people.
Do you think, in that respect, is it more competitive right now when it comes to compensation than it's been previously? Or is it always important?
I think it depends on personal circumstances in a lot of circumstances, but I definitely feel from what I see and from my conversations with candidates, and it might be a direct reflection of some of the types of companies I work for. I work a lot in climate tech and clean tech, and I feel that the mission sometimes trumps what the compensation is. Again, it needs to be a fair compensation, but I see people making lateral moves for missions and industries that they want to be a part of. Whereas 5 years ago, I couldn't get somebody to move if they weren't getting a 10 to 15% pay raise. It was more, people were more money motivated. And then there's the other piece of, okay, well, if you want me to come to the office 5 days a week, then I need X. If I can work from home, I only need this, which makes sense. There's a cost to commuting and going in.
Absolutely. Yeah, you use the old axiom that I used to hear when I was younger, that you should never leave a job unless you're going to get 10 to 15% more, right?
Yeah.
Because you're probably just trading one problem for another, unless there's that benefit. But I think you're right. I think there's a culture thing going on right now that people will move laterally for the right opportunity and the right mission. Absolutely. So
and I like that. I think looking at your happiness, my dad used to always tell me that, pay will make you happy for 3 months, but if you don't like what you're doing, it's not going to keep you happy too long.
Where's that? My dad used to tell me, yes, son, a cheap car you'll be really happy with for 3 months. And then it'll break and you'll get a little more. So I turn that around from an employment perspective, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
A little more buys you a lot, I think, on that side.
For sure.
The last question I have for you today is something I talk to a lot of, organizations, and a friend of mine is having a really hard time. They struggle in their kind of industry. They need people to be together, to meet together, to resolve problems in real time. And the challenge of the virtual meetings is that everything gets scheduled rather than just walking across the hall and getting it done. And so they really are trying to bring people back into the office. And I think there's a lot of businesses that, especially if they rely on kind of, younger work teams that need leadership. I think that's probably true across the board, but they're struggling to find people who really want to come to an office every day. And they're trying to move back to that everyday experience. Is this generally a challenge out there across all industries? And is there this kind of, as much as people want this work-life balance, are employers starting to say, no, we've got to have you here more?
Employers are definitely starting to say that. And the employers who are absolutely struggling to hire people. So Hybrid, I think the days of every job's 100% remote, that's gone. Hopefully we never have anything like that again. I don't think anybody should be work 100% remote. I don't know how healthy that is, but I think hybrid is the new normal. That there's opportunities out there for hybrid. And I think the important thing is for somebody like your friend's company, and I don't know what the industry is, and there are jobs that require you to go in and work on equipment, so maybe it's not possible to do remote. But I think the important thing is, hybrid, 3 days a week, and collaboration tools to be able to create kind of that water cooler effect. I know we, in my company, when we're working remotely, we do office hours. Sometimes we don't even talk, but everybody is on a Zoom and we're working. And so that we can kind of say, hey, I'm doing this, and it just it works. I don't think it works 5 days a week, but I think companies that want people in office 5 days a week are going to cut out a large percentage of the available pool or interested pool of candidates. And I also think that there are jobs that can be done remotely. And if you kind of don't look at that, you cut out other geographies that maybe are more budget friendly for you, and things like that. So it's kind of case by case, and you don't want to discriminate across an organization. If one person has to come in 3 days, I kind of think everybody should have to, but 5 days is going to be rough for any company, and maybe that'll change, but right now, not in my experience.
I think it's a bit of a challenge, for companies where, let's say, they've got a warehouse and a whole operations group that has to be there every day, all day. And then they've got, what appears to that group to be the elite class, right? That doesn't have to be there every day, all day. And so it's the old, well, the salespeople are just playing golf every day, right? Now they feel like the whole organization is playing golf every day. So I don't know that we've come to terms with that. That's just humanity, right? And the inequity of, I decided to be in operations, and, somebody else decided to be a salesperson, or, an office worker, or whatever that may be. Do you find companies kind of struggling with that part of it?
I do. And I advise companies on that part of it, and in those scenarios. I still don't think that they're going to get a salesperson to come into the office 5 days a week. But if you have people who physically have to be in the building 5 days a week to get their job done because there's no other way for them to do it, I think that you have to come up with some sort of hybrid schedule where others are seen in the office as well, because otherwise you're going to end up with a bunch of disgruntled employees. Then you're going to have a turnover problem, a retention problem. So it's tricky, and it's case by case. But I think the overlying consideration is that you really need, like you said, to make sure it's fair and equitable across the organization, and there isn't special treatment, because everybody, whether they're working in the warehouse or whether they're the CEO, plays a part in making that company successful. So you need to be fair.
Yeah, I used to have a boss in my early days of being on a sales team that said that salespeople should have an outhouse for an office and a Cadillac for a car, because he wanted them out there all the time. But he also said, but when they do come to the office, I expect them to go around and say hello to everyone, because I want everyone to know they still work here, and have a relationship with them. So I think, there's a bit of a responsibility that we need to ask some of our flexible workers to extend to those who don't have that type of privilege. And it seems like we need to look for ways that we can, at least in minor ways, extend that privilege to our more operational folks, on a case-by-case basis or something, so that they feel like, they're being thought of, at least, right?
For sure. And I see some of that creativity with some of my clients on jobs like that they can do, this documentation or whatever from home 1 day a week, and they kind of do it on a rotating schedule. I think that creating that opportunity in those roles, if it doesn't already exist, is the way to make that happen.
Yeah. Yeah. It
Yeah.
sounds like it.
Yeah.
Well, Nancy, these are some great ideas and things for folks to think about. Tell us again the name of your organization and how people can find you.
Sure. So the name of my company is Vacaré Group, Vacare Group. And you can visit us on my website at vacaregroup.com or visit our LinkedIn profile. That would be great.
Well, I encourage any of our listeners that don't have their own HR departments and are looking for some help, be it large or small, to reach out to you, because I think I know a lot of them could use a little help. And
Yeah.
sometimes I don't think they understand that there are smaller organizations they can work with, and they don't want to get swallowed up by all these big, firms.
Yeah.
So,
And that's the key. Yeah.
yep. So, and that was your, better idea. So I liked it from the moment I heard about it, because I wasn't aware either that there were kind of, smaller recruiting firms that a company could work with. So,
Yeah.
well, thank you very much.
Tailor it to their budget. So yeah, thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity.
It's wonderful to have you here and to talk with you today. To all of our guests out there, till we meet again, stay connected.